The nature of our fallen lives, living in our fallen world, is that we're going to have to drive on some rough roads now and then. Hey everybody, this is Mike from Catholic Treehouse, and I'd like to welcome you to episode 47 of the Saint in Progress podcast, your source for inspiration, information, and directions for your soul's journey back home to the Father's house. As always, you can find us at catholictreehouse.com or saintinprogress.com and on Substack at catholictreehouse.substack.com. Hey, just a real quick shout out, just a reminder to everybody, we are halfway through October. If you want to get your copy of the Saint Challenge or get signed up for the Saint Challenge daily email, the Saint Challenge does restart on All Souls Day, which is November 1st, which, by the way, is a solemnity. It's on a Saturday this year. So check your local parish listings for masses and everything to see how things are going to be handled. Because technically, if you go to the Vigil Mass on Saturday, that's counting for Sunday. So that's not the Mass for Saturday. Saturday is a solemnity and a holy day of obligation, unless in your diocese they decide to shift it and move it and ball it in with the celebration of Lord's Day on Sunday. So how your diocese decides to handle it is entirely up to them. Check your local parish, but just remember that the Saint Challenge resets on All Saints Day. And honestly, that's how this whole thing, the Saint in Progress podcast, all that got started was with a little minute and 20-second long podcast called The Saint Challenge. So go to saintchallenge.com and pick up your copy today. How are you doing this week? For me personally, spiritually, this past week, I've been on the struggle bus. A lot of distractions during my prayer time. A lot of things spiritually vying for my attention. Lots and lots of people who need prayers. Even my holy hour of Eucharistic adoration, my hour where I recharge my spiritual batteries, was a bit of a spiritual hot mess for me. And since I know that I'm not alone in having these moments, I thought it'd be a good topic to cover this week. Now, before I get started, I wanted to remind everyone of this harsh reality. The road home to the Father's house, well, it's long. And when I say long, I mean it's the rest of your life. Okay, it's easy to think, oh, well, once I get my spiritual life figured out, once I get the right combination of Mass and prayer time and devotions and scripture reading and all that, once I get it all figured out, I'll be on spiritual autopilot for the next however many decades I have to wait until God calls me home. Well, my friends, the spiritual life doesn't work like that. It's more like going on a cross-country road trip. And in between all of the great sights and all the mountains and hills and everything else you get to see, you hit that section of a long, boring, monotonous highway with construction that brings everything down to one lane and slows traffic to a crawl. And while you're looking at how many miles you have left to go, all you can hear is a conversation inside your own head going,
"Are we there yet?
No.
Are 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 we there yet?
No.
And look, I know there's a lot of, well, let's not call them denominations, because they don't like being called denominations. They like calling themselves non-denominational Christians. There's a lot of these other churches out there. Let's just call them options for the sake of this podcast. There's a lot of options out there that kind of promise a shortcut, an easier path, a way off of the long, boring, monotonous highway that's a lot of work. You don't need this and that and the other thing. You don't need confession to a priest and holy days of obligation and worry about mortal sin. You don't need a big, giant book of rules to love Jesus. All you need is to be a good person and read the Bible. That's it. Well, that does sound good, doesn't it? But as the old saying goes, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. You see, the problem, my fellow saints in progress, is that we are broken. Go back and listen to episodes 2 and 3 and 4 about our birth defect, our handicapped life, and our root sin. You and me and everyone else on this planet, we are all inclined to not be good people. And besides, did Jesus ever say, just be a good person? No, because who defines what good is? Us? Well, if we allow ourselves to define what a good person is, were you ever going to call yourself a bad person? No. Why would you? You're going to make all sorts of excuses like, it was my wife that gave me the apple to eat, or it was the snake who tricked me. And then you're going to double down and defend that with those obstacles to truth I talked about a couple episodes ago. All the logical fallacies and cognitive biases. You're going to try everything possible to rationalize your bad behavior so you can sleep well at night. Now, what does all this have to do with struggling spiritually? Well, it's simple. The nature of our fallen lives, living in our fallen world, is that we're going to have to drive on some rough roads now and then. Some of them might be short and others might be long, but we're going to have them. And right when we hit these rough spiritual roads, where we're distracted, where we're worn out, we're spending a lot of effort, not getting much, or maybe not getting anything from it, well, that's where we get tempted. And I do mean tempted. Let that sink in. Tempted to take a shortcut to entertain an option that sounds like the easier route. Or maybe the temptation is to abandon the journey altogether. Now, these seasons, they're called periods of spiritual desolation. And they are contrasted by periods of what's called spiritual consolation. This makes up the bulk of the work of St. Ignatius of Loyola and what he calls his spiritual exercises and the discernment of spirits. The general gist is this. When you hit these rough roads, these periods of spiritual desolation, you're going to be tempted. So St. Ignatius says that when you're making progress in the spiritual life, trying to do better, the enemy will put spiritual obstacles in the way. Now, if it becomes prolonged and deep, it's something that St. John of the Cross called the dark night of the soul. Now, I'm going to go off on a tangent for a second here. This is one of those times when I love being Catholic, to be completely honest with you. There's so much unique insight that these saints and other spiritual masters have that they are each unique in and of their own right, but they are complementary pieces of the spiritual puzzle that makes up our interior life. So anyway, St. John of the Cross, now he was a Carmelite mystic, and the dark night of the soul is something he wrote, and he talks about what he calls the three ages of the interior life: the purgative, the illuminative, and the unitive. And the interior life is similar yet different than our physical and emotional lives. So like, okay, physically, we're born and we can see the changes from childhood to puberty to adulthood to old age. We can see when there's dysfunction physically when someone fails to mature properly, right? Maybe a hormone imbalance or something like that that fails to produce the right physical result. And that medically can be easily seen and determined by blood tests and things like that. Emotionally, again, we change as we mature. We can observe behaviors in people or in ourselves, and we can see when there's a dysfunction. Like, for instance, the person who's perpetually living like they're still in high school. I mean, we see that stereotyped in movies sometimes, but there's a stereotype for a reason, because we all know that people like this do exist, right? Now, spiritually, it's more difficult to understand our spiritual growth. And sometimes people stay stuck in a period of spiritual infancy, and they never even get to late childhood or into adolescence or adulthood spiritually. So this is where a good spiritual director comes in. They can help you figure out where you're at and what you need to do to get to the next level to grow to adulthood spiritually. But these three ages, the purgative, the illuminative, and the unitive, there's a course that we have to will ourselves to take. And it's not like the physical life where our bodies just naturally mature. It's not even like the emotional life where most people do emotionally grow up from being an 8-year-old. The spiritual life is something where we have to choose and will ourselves to get on this journey to go through these three ages of the interior life. Now, as we get to the close of the purgative life, as we eliminate all the different habits of sin and that kind of thing, and we want to grow closer to God, it's common that we have these consolations that God gives us to encourage us to keep doing that. But then as we get to the close of it, it's common to experience the dark night of the soul where the road looks impossibly long and terribly rough because it's nothing but desolation. It's all spiritual desolation and no consolation. That's because what God does is he removes the consolations so we don't become addicted to and come to love the consolations themselves, but rather so we choose to chase after he who gives us the consolations. That is, we choose to love the giver, not the gift. So the important thing to remember is this: Jesus doesn't promise you an easy path. He says that we are to take up our cross and follow him. Take up our cross. My fellow saints in progress, sometimes that cross we need to carry isn't health issues or work issues or family issues, which are all crosses of their own. Sometimes it's the cross of the spiritual life that we have to carry. And sometimes it's heavy. And sometimes we have to carry it on a really rough road, alone, in the dark night of the soul. And if you're struggling in the spiritual life, if you hit a rough patch of road, if you feel the burden of desolation, take a moment and pray and say, Lord, I want the cross. Lord, I love the cross. Because the devil will tell you, you don't need the cross. Put it down. Take the shortcut. We need to remember that Jesus tells us that if we are to follow him, we do need that cross. So if you're struggling spiritually, embrace the sacraments more. Go to Mass more often and receive the Eucharist. Go to confession more often. The graces of the sacraments are tremendous. And finally, pray harder and pray more often. As St. Ignatius tells us, if the devil sees that what he's doing causes us to pray harder, it's reason for him to leave us alone. Remember, an imperfect prayer is better than no prayer at all. That's it for this week, my friends. As always, love God and love your neighbor. Stay in a state of sanctifying grace. Pray your rosary for peace this month, as the Holy Father asks us to. And if possible, do it together with your family. Be sure to pray for the conversion of hearts of all those who have fallen away from the faith, those who have gotten off the road because it was too rough. As always, remember, my friends, you are a saint in progress, so go out there and be a saint.